In this lesson, we implement everything we've learned in this course to do a study in composition and hierarchy organization. Okay, so I'm in 11_begin, and I am in the composition that you have over here down at the very bottom called hierarchy exercise. So you just want to go ahead and double click that to open that up. I'm just going to close out these other tabs so there's no confusion there. So we have hierarchy exercise opened up here, and I just want to kind of go through the process with you in real time of how I would kind of start to establish some hierarchy and create a little motion piece if I was given sort of a prompt. So I've created this little text file here, and you can find that in your project files under skydiving text. And we just have a little notepad file here that says, skydive, your adventure is waiting for you somewhere around 10,000 feet. Conveniently make your reservation with your smartphone or tablet on site. Call us or visit our website to get your adventure started today. Skydive. So this seems like a pretty typical little kind of commercial you might see. And let's keep in mind just with this example that we don't have access to any voiceover, so we're not worried about trying to animate any of this text to someone reading it. So we need to animate everything just with what we would see on screen. So I'm going to pull this off my screen, but I'm going to continue to refer to it. I just don't want this to be in the way of the After Effects interface. So you're going to want to go ahead and pull up that text file for yourself, and then we'll kind of refer to that throughout the lesson. So let's just talk about what the assets are we have over here in our project panel. I have this little skydive AI file. So we have the fictional company's logo here, Skydive, and then we say your adventure is waiting for you somewhere around 10,000 feet. So we have all of these pictures over here in our project panel of different kind of skydiving images. So I'm kind of clicking through those, and we saw a little bit of these earlier in the course. So this top one we're not going to be using, so if you want to pop that somewhere else really quickly just so you're not confused by that, we're only going to be working with what you see here. So if you start out with the kind of just logo of this company, I might put that right in the middle. So I would have that here. Maybe I want to grab this kind of background that I've comped up so it almost looks like the color of a sky. Maybe do something like that. Or maybe we'd want to start out by putting the skydive comp or logo inside of a picture. So we kind of talked about how we would do that earlier. So let's talk about how maybe we would want to organize this. Now this picture is pretty dark here, so maybe we would want to just create a little more contrast by making the skydive text actually not black, but maybe we'll have it white or even gray. So I'm going to come back in there, delete that background. Maybe we want to line this up just so it's still close to the middle, but our person almost looks like they're kind of here together with this other person. So that could be kind of interesting. And if I want this logo to be white, I can add a quick effect to change that. So I'm going to come up here to Window, go to Effects and Presets, type in Fill. And that's just going to give me the generate fill effect. I can drop that on there. It's going to default to red. I'm just going to move that over there to white. So now we have a composition that looks like this. So now we've kind of just set up our first image here, and we already have a little bit of hierarchy where skydive is actually the first thing that my eye goes to just because of the contrast between the background and because it's text. So I kind of start here and then I move up over here and begin to kind of look at this parachuter image. So it's up to you how you want to arrange this. Maybe you even, maybe you want to change it where this kind of animates in. So maybe you would start out with it a little bit higher up in the sky. So let's go ahead and we'll just set a position keyframe right there at about 2 seconds. And then with our current time indicator at the beginning, maybe we start out like this. So kind of this sort of thing happens. So that's a little more interesting maybe than what we had earlier. So there's animation rather than just text. Now, the next bit of info we have is your adventure is waiting for you somewhere around 10,000 feet. So maybe I'm ready to transition to a new picture now. And something, maybe a picture that we would want to use is something kind of interesting. So, but we want to have contrast too. So even though this picture is very interesting, maybe we want to actually use a picture that feels a little bit different. Now we're telling a story with these images. So this image here that you see at the end looks like someone's already landed on the ground. So we probably don't want to go with that. This image might be interesting though. It's somebody who looks like they're kind of gearing up to go on a skydive. So maybe this one is one of the next ones we want to use. This picture is also great because it has a lot of negative space over here on the right. It's clearly kind of being set up here to use the rule of thirds. So I'm just going to take that picture away that we see that we dragged on there earlier. And then this picture that we've just now added, let's go ahead and animate this picture in from the top. So once kind of that 2-second mark is hit, let's go ahead and drop this picture in. So we'll bring up the position, and I'm just going to move that forward so it has about a second to animate in, and then we can pull this up out of the comp window. So it kind of almost happens like this. And then we can bring in our text over here on the side. So let's say something like your adventure, and you can also cut and paste. I would almost always recommend cutting and pasting because sometimes as motion designers we're not necessarily the best spellers, and there's nothing more embarrassing than having a misspelling in your composition. Delivering that to a client is never something that you want to do. So you always want to type it out in something, spell check it, and then use the text from there. So let's come in here and kind of fix that. Now, adventure seems like a pretty important word in this sentence. So maybe we want to make that feel a little more important. So maybe I'll change that to bold italic. And maybe the whole thing could even be just a little bit bigger. And maybe we even want to change the color of adventure. So come in there, highlight adventure. And we kind of have these nice colors going inside of the composition. So maybe kind of this blue color. I like to color pick colors within my comp a lot of times, and then I'll take a look at how they're interacting with the background, and let's create just a little more contrast by giving this a little bit more of a bluish color. So I'm just kind of moving up towards a more saturated hue than what we had earlier, but I'm still keeping it up here closer to the whites so that we have contrast with that background. So now this color feels like it fits with this composition, but it also is a little bit brighter than anything else that we have in the comp. Now let's talk about how we would align this bit of text. The eyes are going to be one of the very first things you go to. So I'm going to move this down so it's kind of just aligning right there in the middle with our person's eyes. So it kind of looks like this. Now let's add a little bit of interest to this bit of text animating. So I'm going to kind of come in here, and right as this picture hits, this is when I want my text to start coming in. So I'm going to give it just about a second to animate in, and we can go ahead and set a position keyframe for that. Then I can move back here and we can move that there. So kind of gets this sort of a look now. Pretty interesting. Now, of course, if I was going to come in here and polish this animation really tightly, I would want to change up my keyframes to have some different kinds of interpolation. Right now, we're just kind of getting a rough sense of what the compositions should look like. Now, I want to add another picture that kind of reinforces that message of somewhere around 10,000 feet. So that's the next bit of text we have here. And I want to put this with a kind of picture that feels like it should go along with being up in the sky. So we could use that little image we have of the plane, but maybe a better use of that would be the parachute we have here. So let's go ahead and grab this one. I'm going to just drop that on top of everything else. And we don't have to frame this up just like our other one was earlier, the black and white one that we saw in the first place. So if I kind of scale this down a little bit, it feels very similar to that first one. But I could also scale it up and kind of reposition this just so that it's almost creating that symmetrical balance you see in this composition. And then we could put our text right here in the middle. So that's going to create a really nice kind of just opening for us in that negative space created by the sky, and really just kind of tie it in where you sort of have that rhythm where you're moving from the person to the parachute and through the text. So let's go ahead and add that bit of text. I'm just going to cut and paste that. So somewhere around 10,000 feet. Now you'll see that this is automatically using the color that we had from our last piece of text, and that creates almost no contrast with our background. So let's come in here, double click that color picker, and this bit of text here is going to create a lot of unity between the colors that we have in our comp and the sky. So maybe a little bit more interesting than just using plain white would be to color pick that kind of neon color that you see there. So I kind of want to just scale this down into the position here, but as I'm doing that, this feels like it maybe gets a little bit too small. So let's go ahead and bump that down onto the next line, and maybe instead of feet we could actually just use that apostrophe mark to make that feel just kind of abbreviate that and make that number feel like we have more room to work with it. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight all of those digits, and then we can bump up that number right there, and I'm going to kind of bring in that tracking a little bit so that feels a little bit tighter, and we can start to kind of bring that leading down there so that feels like it isn't overlapping quite so much. And we can bump that size up a little bit more. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. I'm sort of aligning this to itself. And now we have a lot more flexibility for how big we can make this text, and now it looks a lot more readable than what we had earlier. Now, one of the things that kind of starts to happen is I feel like there's a little bit of a competition now going on between the yellow color in my parachute and the yellow color of my text. So maybe I want to come in there and make the text feel just a little bit different. So maybe come over here and put a little bit more white into that yellow color, just right up there. So now that feels like it's still yellow, we're still pulling from this, but there's just a little more contrast between those elements, so there's not so much competition. Now you may want to leave those the same color. You may even want to come in there and make it this blue color here, or maybe this purple color. It's all just about experimenting to figure out what's the best message and the best way to communicate all these different things together. Now I need to go ahead and add a little bit of an animation to this, so right about here where that last keyframe was is where we'd want to start that. And I'm just going to use the same technique that we used earlier where this feels like it's kind of falling in from the sky. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the position keys, and we'll just set that up there. And then this one I'm going to move up. So now we have sort of this sort of animation. And then this piece of text, maybe we want to bring in from the bottom. So I'll go ahead and hit the P key for this, and we'll just move forward about a second, hit that stopwatch, and then move that down out of frame. Okay, so now we have our text coming in right as our parachuter kind of hits there. So let's watch just a quick run preview of what we've created so far. And we have more text here that we could work with, but the main goal of this composition is just to really get you to see how to break up your different pieces of text with different images. So we're creating hierarchy by breaking the message up into kind of different just bite-sized chunks that are easy to digest with that picture. So if we had taken all of the text and put it on top of one picture, maybe not as effective as if we would have just grabbed a few little bits of that message and then figure out which pictures went best with them. So we established hierarchy throughout the whole shot. We started out here, our title was the most important, then we came in here, added our person that was in our picture, and then we did this a second time with our second person and the next bit of text. And then as we move through, it becomes more exciting. So it's sort of telling a story. Now, one of the things I'm noticing as I'm watching this through is that we really didn't give enough time for these things to be read on their own. So I would probably want to come in there, kind of push this back a little bit so that my first skydive image has a little more time. And then this one as well, push that forward a little bit more. So now this just kind of is going to sit here for a moment. So you can just take in that message, get this read, and your viewer doesn't feel rushed to read what you have and then feel like, oh, I missed that. I don't even know what that was talking about because it went too quickly. So that's a big part of your hierarchy too. You want to make sure that you're not animating so quickly and getting from one image to the next that it just starts to feel overwhelming. So in this lesson, we did a little experiment with hierarchy and just talked about how we would organize text with images in a composition that needs to convey a specific message.